Hi, I'm Elena. My family once called me a disgrace at our Christmas dinner. My mother clinked her glass, toasted to my brother's success, and slid a gift box across the table with a card that read, "Maybe next year you'll matter." They said I was worthless, that I'd never amount to anything. But what they didn't know was that I already owned the company they all worked for. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The snow fell in thick, silent flakes as I pulled into the circular driveway of my parents' Boston estate on Christmas Eve. My tires crunched over the freshly plowed gravel, and I sat for a moment watching the warm glow from the windows cast long rectangles of light across the pristine white ground. Through the frosted glass, I could see silhouettes moving about, the familiar shapes of my family members, gathered without me for the pre-dinner cocktails that had become tradition. I glanced at the small wrapped gift on the passenger seat. It wasn't much, a first edition of my father's favorite author that had taken me months to track down. I'd had it authenticated, preserved, and bound in leather that matched his study. The receipt was still in my wallet. $12,150. An extravagance he would never appreciate, but I had tried anyway. Some habits die harder than hope. My phone buzzed, with a message from my assistant, Margot. "Final acquisition papers came through. Congratulations, boss. Merry Christmas." I didn't respond. Instead, I tucked the phone away, gathered my things, and stepped out into the biting December air. The cold hit my lungs like a reminder that I was still alive, still breathing, still here despite everything. My heels sank slightly into the snow as I made my way up the stone steps to the massive oak door that had intimidated me since childhood. I didn't need to knock. My younger brother Andrew opened the door before I reached for the handle, his face a careful neutral that had replaced the warmth we'd shared as children. "You're late," he said, not unkindly, but not welcoming either. "Mom was about to serve. Dinner without you." "Would have been the first time," I replied with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. He didn't contradict me. Inside, the house smelled of pine, cinnamon, and the unmistakable crisp scent of wealth, that peculiar blend of designer perfumes, polished wood, and the subtle confidence that comes with old money. The chandelier in the foyer cast a golden glow over marble floors that had been the setting for countless disappointments. In the main living room, my family had assembled like actors on a stage they'd been performing on for decades. My father stood by the fireplace, tumbler of scotch in hand, deep in conversation with my Uncle Stuart. My mother glided between guests, her emerald dress matching the massive Christmas tree that dominated the corner of the room. My sister-in-law Catherine was perched on the arm of an antique chair, laughing too loudly at something my brother Michael had said. No one noticed me at first. I stood in the doorway, coat still on, watching this tableau of familial warmth that had never quite included me. "Elena!" My mother's voice cut through the gentle hum of conversation. "You've finally decided to join us." Her smile was practiced perfection, her tone carrying that subtle edge that only I seemed to hear. "You've missed the cocktail hour completely." "Traffic," I said simply, though I'd been parked outside for 20 minutes, gathering courage. "Well, you're here now," she said, taking my coat and handing it to the housekeeper with barely a glance. "Everyone's already seated for dinner." I followed her into the dining room where the family table had been extended to its full glory, gleaming under the light of another chandelier. Place settings of fine china and crystal sparkled against the deep mahogany. Name cards written in my mother's perfect calligraphy marked each person's place. I found mine at the far end, next to Cousin Philip, who was visiting from Germany and whom I'd met exactly twice, as far from my parents as geography would allow without placing me in another room entirely. "Elena works in some tech thing," I heard my mother say to Philip as I took my seat. "Very entry-level, but she seems to enjoy it." I didn't correct. "Her?" What would be the point? Telling her that I was the founder and CEO of Lumina Dynamics would only invite skepticism, followed by dismissive questions about how a little startup could possibly be sustainable. They'd done it before, 3 Christmases ago, when I'd first mentioned leaving my stable corporate job to build something of my own. How brave, my father had said then, in the same tone he might use to describe someone jumping from a plane without checking their parachute. The first course arrived, a delicate butternut squash soup that steamed gently in porcelain bowls. My father stood, raising his glass for the traditional Christmas Eve toast. "To family," he began, his voice carrying the authoritative tone that had built Kincaid Industries from a regional supplier into a national powerhouse. "To health and success, to the wonderful year behind us and the promising one ahead." Glasses clinked around the table. I raised mine silently, watching the candlelight play through the crystal. "Michael's expansion into the Asian markets has exceeded all expectations," my father continued, nodding to my oldest brother. "The Singapore office is already showing a 40% return on investment." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. More clinking, more murmurs of approval. "Andrew and Catherine have blessed us with news of a grandchild on the way," he added, beaming at them. "The next generation of Kincaids to carry on our legacy." I took a sip of wine, focusing on the way it warmed my throat rather than the fact that I hadn't received so much as a nod in this parade of familial achievements. But then my father cleared his throat and turned toward me. "And Elena is still finding her way." His smile tightened. "Still chasing that startup dream of hers. What's it called again, dear?" "Lumina Dynamics," I said quietly. "Yes, that's it." "Well, persistence is a virtue, I suppose." Several family members had the grace to look uncomfortable. Uncle Stuart studied his soup with sudden fascination. Aunt Patricia adjusted her napkin unnecessarily. The message was clear. Elena's little hobby business wasn't worth celebrating alongside real achievements. Dinner progressed as it always did. Course after impeccable course, conversation flowing around me but rarely including me. I answered politely when spoken to, laughed at the appropriate moments, and focused on the food that I barely tasted. As dessert was being served, a traditional Christmas pudding that my mother had never actually made herself but insisted was her recipe, my father stood again, this time with gift boxes stacked in his arms. "A little pre-Christmas tradition," he announced, though we'd never done this before. "Just a small token for each of you." He moved around the table, placing a wrapped package in front of each family member. When he reached me, his smile never faltered, but something in his eyes did. The box he placed before me was smaller than the others, wrapped in different paper. "Go ahead, open them," my mother urged, her eyes bright with anticipation. One by one, my family members unwrapped their gifts. Michael received a set of keys to a new yacht. Andrew and Catherine opened a deed to a vacation property in Aspen. Aunt Patricia gasped at a diamond bracelet. Uncle Stuart admired a vintage watch. I carefully untied the ribbon on my package, lifted the lid, and found a card inside. The room had grown quiet as everyone watched. I opened the envelope and read the handwritten note within. "Maybe next year you'll matter. Merry Christmas." Beneath it was a gift certificate for a career counseling service. The silence was absolute. I looked up to find my father watching me, challenge in his eyes. My mother sipped her wine, a small, satisfied smile playing at her lips. "Well," I said finally, tucking the card back into its envelope. "Thank you for the thought." "We're just concerned," my mother said, her voice dripping with practiced sincerity. "All this time wasting away on a business that's going nowhere. It's time to grow up, Elena." "The disgrace of the family," my father added with a chuckle that others nervously joined. "But we love you anyway." I didn't flinch. I'd expected this, or something like it. Every year there was a new way to remind me that I was the disappointment, the failure, the cautionary tale they could point to when teaching their children about ambition without direction. What I hadn't expected was Michael's next words. "Dad's..." "Right, Elle. It's been 3 years. Time to admit defeat and come work for Kincaid. I could use someone in middle management at the Toronto office." "Middle management," I repeated softly. "Be realistic," Andrew added, not unkindly. "Your little coding project was a nice experiment, but the market's saturated. There's no room for another player." I looked around at their faces, some pitying, some amused, all certain they knew better than I did. They saw a 31-year-old woman who'd failed to launch, who'd thrown away a promising career at a Fortune 500 company to chase some technical pipe dream. They saw someone to be tolerated at family gatherings, someone whose Christmas gift could be a deliberate insult, because really, what had I done to deserve better? What they didn't see was the woman who'd just completed the acquisition of Kincaid Industries' largest supplier. The woman whose little coding project had revolutionized supply chain management across 3 continents. The woman who'd raised $450 million in venture capital last round because her technology was not just profitable, but transformative. They didn't see me. "You're right," I said, rising from my chair. "I should be more realistic." I reached for my purse, pulled out a small thumb drive, and placed it on the table. "Merry Christmas, Dad. It's not much, but maybe you'll find it interesting." My father frowned, picking up the drive with a mixture of confusion and disdain. "What is this? Just some light reading for the holiday. Acquisition papers, board transition plans, retention agreements for key personnel." I smiled. I bought Supply Corps last week. The color drained from my father's face. Michael set down his fork with a clatter. "That's not possible," my father said. "Supply Corps isn't for sale. We've been trying to acquire them for years." "They weren't for sale," I agreed, "until I made them an offer they couldn't refuse." "With what money?" Andrew asked, his voice rising slightly. "My little coding project," I replied, "is currently valued at $2 billion, and as of January 1st, Lumina Dynamics will be Supply Corps' only client. Which means, Dad, that Kincaid Industries will need to find a new supplier." I paused. "Or a new owner." The silence that followed was different from before. Stunned, horrified, confused. "You're bluffing," my father said finally, but his voice lacked conviction. My phone buzzed again. I glanced down to see another message from Margot. "Board. Meeting confirmed for December 26th. All members attending. Need anything else, boss?" I smiled, tucked the phone away, and picked up my coat from the chair where I'd draped it. "Merry Christmas, everyone. I'd stay for coffee, but I have an early flight to Zurich tomorrow. Investors, you understand." I walked out into the silent night, the snow now falling more heavily, obscuring my footprints almost as quickly as I made them. Behind me, through the windows of the dining room, I could see my family frozen in tableau, my father still holding the thumb drive like it might bite him. The drive back to my apartment in Cambridge was quiet and peaceful. The streets were nearly empty on Christmas Eve, most people already tucked away with the families who loved them. I didn't feel sad exactly, just hollow, like I'd finally excised something that had been poisoning me for years. My phone rang as I pulled into my building's garage. Margot again. "Boss?" she said when I answered. "Sorry to bother you on Christmas Eve, but Takahashi-san is requesting a brief call tomorrow morning before your flight. The Tokyo team has some questions about the integration timeline." "Schedule it for 7 a.m., I replied. "And Margot, thank you for everything." "Just doing my job," she said, but I could hear the smile in her voice. "How was the family dinner?" I thought about the card, the faces, the stunned silence as I walked out. "Illuminating," I said finally. "Get some rest. It's going to be a busy week." Inside my apartment, I kicked off my heels and poured myself a small glass of scotch, the same brand my father favored, though I'd never told him that. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the Charles River, watching the snow swirl in the glow of the streetlights. 3 years ago, I'd sat in this same spot, nursing a similar drink, after another disastrous family Christmas. That night, I'd been crying, my laptop open to a resignation letter I'd been drafting for my corporate job. My family had spent the entire evening questioning my decision to start Lumina, picking apart my business plan, suggesting I was having some sort of breakdown. A woman in tech? My father had scoffed. The odds are already against you, Elena. Why make it harder on yourself? That night, something had hardened in me. I'd deleted the resignation letter and instead stayed up until dawn, coding the first prototype of what would become Lumina's core technology. I'd stopped seeking their approval and started seeking success on my own terms. Now, 3 years later, I stood in the same spot, no longer broken but built anew, stronger in the places that had been damaged. I raised my glass to my reflection. To the disgrace of the family, I whispered. Long may she reign. My phone buzzed with an incoming email. The subject line read, Urgent, Clinked Industries stock value. I opened it to find a message from my father. What have you done? The Asian markets just opened and our stock is in free fall. Call me immediately. I set the phone down without replying. Tomorrow would be soon enough to explain the terms of my offer, that I would sell Supply Corp back to Clinked Industries for exactly $1, on the condition that my father retire and the board appoint me as CEO. Some might call it revenge. I preferred to think of it as correction, a realignment of a family dynamic that had been broken for decades. They'd called me worthless, and I'd proven my worth. They'd labeled me a disgrace, and I'd built something graceful and powerful. But as I stood watching the snow, I realized that this victory felt hollow. I'd wanted their respect, their recognition, their love, and instead, I'd gotten their fear. Was that really what I'd been working for all these years? The buzz of my phone interrupted my thoughts again. This time, it was Andrew. Dad's having a meltdown, the message read. What's really going on, Elle? I considered ignoring it, letting them all stew in uncertainty the way they'd left me to stew in dismissal, for years. But Andrew had always been the kindest of my siblings, the one who sometimes tried to bridge the gulf between me and the rest of the family. Nothing that can't be fixed, I replied after a moment. But things will change. He's talking about disowning you, came the quick response. Mom's in tears. I should have felt something at that. Satisfaction, perhaps, or grief. Instead, there was only a tired resignation. Of course, that would be their response. Not to examine how they'd treated me, but to double down, to push me further away, rather, then consider that they might have been wrong. Let him do what he needs to do, I wrote back. I'll do the same. I turned my phone off then, set it on the counter, and walked to my bedroom. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. The call with Tokyo, the flight to Zurich, the countless decisions that came with being a CEO. But tonight, on this quiet Christmas Eve, I allowed myself the luxury of simply being Elena, not the disappointment, not the disgrace, not the billionaire businesswoman, just a woman who had finally stopped seeking approval from those who would never give it. As I drifted off to sleep, I thought about the small wrapped package I'd left on the passenger seat of my car, the gift for my father that he would never receive. Perhaps that was fitting. Some bridges once burned should remain ashes. Morning came with a thin winter sunlight filtering through my bedroom blinds. I woke before my alarm, the events of the previous night flooding back as consciousness returned. My phone, when I turned it on, was flooded with notifications. Missed calls from my father, mother, Michael, text messages demanding explanations, emails from board members seeking clarification, and one message from Margot. Tokyo call in 30. Coffee's brewing. Boss, Are you okay? I smiled at that last part. In 3 years, Margot had gone from an efficient assistant to something approaching a friend. The closest thing I had to one, given how completely I'd immersed myself in building Lumina. I'm fine, I texted back. Be there in 20. I showered quickly, dressed in the gray suit I'd laid out the night before, and packed the last few items for my Zurich trip. As I zipped my suitcase closed, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. My mother's number. I hesitated, finger hovering over the screen. What could she possibly say now that would matter? What words could undo years of subtle undermining, of disappointed sighs, of "we're just concerned" conversations that left me feeling 2 inches tall? But some habits die harder than hope. I answered. Elena. Her voice was brittle, controlled. What you're doing is unforgivable. No greeting, no Merry Christmas. Just accusation, immediate and direct. What exactly am I doing, Mother? I asked, keeping my own voice level. Don't play innocent. Your father is beside himself. Threatening Supply Corps, our main supplier. Using your little company to try to strong-arm us. It's childish and vindictive. I closed my eyes, counted to 3. It's business, Mother. Nothing more, nothing less. It's family, she countered. And you're destroying it for what? Because we gave you a reality check last night? Because we're tired of watching you waste your potential on some vanity project? My vanity project employs 400 people across 9 countries, I said. We've revolutionized how supply chains function in 3 industries. Harvard Business Review featured our technology in their cover story last month. And yet you feel the need to attack your family's company? Your inheritance? I laughed. Then, a short, disbelieving sound. My inheritance? You and Dad made it very clear last night, and every day before that, exactly what you think I deserve. That's not fair, she said, her voice dropping to that hurt tone she used when she wanted to make me feel guilty. We've always supported you. A career counseling certificate is not support, Mother. It's an insult wrapped in festive paper. She was quiet for a moment. Come home, she said finally. We can talk about this as a family. Your father is willing to discuss bringing you into the company in a significant role. Of course, now that I had power, now that I had leverage, suddenly there was room for me at Kincaid Industries. Not because they valued me or my abilities, but because they feared what I might do without their control. I have a company, I said, simply. And a flight to catch. Elena, please. Goodbye, Mother. Merry Christmas. I ended the call, picked up my suitcase, and left the apartment without looking back. In the elevator down to the parking garage, I checked my watch. Still 15 minutes before the Tokyo call. Just enough time to stop for a real coffee on the way to the office. Outside, Boston had transformed overnight. The snow had stopped, leaving the city blanketed in white that glittered in the morning sun. The streets were quiet, most businesses closed for Christmas Day. But I knew one cafe that would be open, a small place run by an elderly Vietnamese couple who didn't celebrate Christmas and saw no reason to close for a holiday that wasn't theirs. As I pulled into the nearly empty parking lot of Kim's Cafe, my phone buzzed again. Another call from my father. I declined it without hesitation and walked into the warm, fragrant space. Miss Elena, Mr. Kim called from behind the counter. Merry Christmas. Working today? Always, I smiled. Just the usual, please. As he prepared my latte, I glanced around the cafe. Empty except for one other patron, a young woman hunched over a laptop, typing furiously, a cold cup of coffee at her elbow. She looked up briefly, caught my eye, and gave a small nod of recognition. Not of me personally, but of the kinship of those who worked while the world celebrated. Mr. Kim handed me my coffee in a to-go cup. On the house today, he insisted when I tried to pay. Christmas gift. His simple kindness, offered without expectation or manipulation, brought an unexpected lump to my throat. "Thank you," I managed. Back in my car, I took a moment before starting the engine. My phone showed 3 more missed calls and a text from Andrew. "Whatever this is, it isn't you, Elle. You're better than this." But that was the problem, wasn't it? They had no idea who I really was. They'd created a narrative about me, the disappointment, the failure, the family disgrace, and had stubbornly clung to it despite all evidence to the contrary. They couldn't see me succeeding because they'd decided years ago that I wouldn't. The drive to my office was quick through the empty streets. Lumina's headquarters occupied the top 3 floors of a renovated warehouse in Cambridge's tech corridor. The brick building, with its industrial windows and exposed pipes, couldn't have been more different from Clinked Industries' gleaming glass tower downtown. I'd chosen it deliberately, a physical manifestation of how differently I saw the business world. Margot was waiting in the lobby, tablet in hand, perfectly put together despite the early hour and holiday. "Conference room A is set up for the Tokyo call," she said, falling into step beside me as I headed for the elevator. "I've sent you the latest integration numbers. Oh, and—" She hesitated. "And," I prompted. "Your father called the office 3 times. He's threatening to come here." I stepped into the elevator, pressed the button for the 12th floor. "Let security know. If he shows up, he can wait in the lobby." Margot nodded, making a note. "Also, these came for you this morning." She handed me a thick stack of cards. "Holiday wishes from the team. They insisted I give them to you today." I took the bundle, surprised. I'd given the entire staff the week off, with only a skeleton crew of volunteers, paid triple time, manning essential functions. Yet dozens of my employees had taken the time to write cards, to express gratitude, to wish me well. As the elevator ascended, I flipped through them quickly. Handwritten notes, some brief, some lengthy. A crayon drawing from someone's child. A photo of the engineering team with a note, "Best boss ever. Don't tell Santa." My throat tightened again. These people knew me, really knew me. They'd seen me work alongside them, solve problems, make mistakes, learn, grow. They'd witnessed my leadership firsthand, not through the distorted lens of family expectation. And they'd chosen to acknowledge me, to see me, on a day when they could have been focused entirely on their own celebrations. By the time we reached the 12th floor, I'd made a decision. "Margot," I said as we walked toward the conference room, "after the Tokyo call, I need you to draft a new proposal for Clinked Industries." "Different terms?" she asked, already typing notes. "Completely different approach. We're not going to demand I be made CEO. We're not going to force my father to retire." She looked up, surprised. "But that was the plan. After how they've treated you." "It's not about them anymore," I said, surprising myself with how true the words felt. "It's about what's right for both companies. Draft a true partnership proposal. Technology sharing, streamlined supply, chains, mutual growth opportunities. No takeovers, no power plays." Margot studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You're sure?" I thought about the cards in my hand, the team that believed in me, the company I'd built from nothing but determination and vision. I thought about my family, trapped in their narrow definition of success, unable to see value in anything that didn't fit their preconceptions. "I'm sure," I said. "I don't need to run their company to prove my worth. I already have my own." The Tokyo call went smoothly, our Japanese partners responding enthusiastically to the integration timeline for their systems. As I spoke about projected efficiencies and implementation schedules, I felt a clarity I hadn't experienced in years. Last night's confrontation with my family, painful as it had been, had severed something. Not just between us, but within me. The last thread of seeking their approval had finally snapped. When the call ended, I remained in the conference room, gazing out at the Boston skyline. The city was beginning to stir, a few cars moving along the snow-covered streets, smoke rising from chimneys as families woke to their Christmas celebrations. My phone buzzed with a text from Andrew. "Dad's on his way to your office. He's not in a good place, Elle. Be careful." I didn't reply. Instead, I called Margot in. "My father's coming here," I said. "When he arrives, bring him up." Her eyes widened slightly. "Are you sure that's wise?" "Probably not," I admitted, "but it's necessary." While I waited, I reviewed the preliminary partnership proposal Margot had drafted. It was good, beneficial to both companies, forward-thinking, profitable. There was no vindictiveness in it, no power play, just sound business sense. I made a few notes, suggested some adjustments, and sent it back to her for refinement. 40 minutes later, my office door opened. My father stood there, still wearing his coat, his face flushed with either cold or anger or both. Behind him, Margot gave me a questioning look. I nodded, and she closed the door, leaving us alone. "What is this place?" he demanded without preamble, gesturing around my office. "Playing at being a CEO in some renovated factory?" I remained seated behind my desk. "Good morning, Dad. Merry Christmas to you, too." He shrugged off his coat, tossed it onto a chair. "Cut the games, Elena. What exactly do you think you're doing?" "Running my company," I replied calmly. "Just like you run yours." "By attacking your family? By trying to destroy what I've built?" I shook my head. "I'm not destroying anything. I made a business move, acquiring a company that aligns with our technology and vision. A company that happens to be our main supplier." He was nearly shouting now. "You did this deliberately to hurt us, to get back at me for what? For telling you the truth last night? For trying to guide you back to a sensible path?" I studied him. This man who had shaped so much of my life, whose approval I had sought for so long. He looked older suddenly, more fragile than I remembered, the lines around his mouth deeper, the gray in his hair more pronounced. For the first time, I could see him clearly, not as the towering figure of my childhood, but as a man, flawed and finite. "Sit down, Dad," I said quietly. To my surprise, he did, collapsing into the chair across from my desk as though the anger had been the only thing keeping him upright. "I didn't acquire Supply Corps to hurt you," I said. "I did it because it was the right move for Lumina. Their distribution network, combined with our technology, creates efficiencies that will transform the industry." "And cutting off Kincaid Industries? Was that also just good business?" I smiled slightly. "I never said I was cutting you off. That was your assumption." His eyes narrowed. "What game are you playing?" "No game." I pushed a tablet across the desk toward him. "This is a partnership proposal. Lumina and Kincaid working together. Your manufacturing expertise, our technological innovation. It would benefit both companies significantly." He didn't touch the tablet. "And what do you want in return? To be installed as my successor? To push Michael aside?" I shook my head. "I don't want to run Kincaid Industries, Dad. I never did. I have my own company, one I built myself, one that reflects my values and vision. All I ever wanted from you was recognition that what I was doing had value, that I had value. So this whole thing, threatening our supply chain, crashing our stock, it was all for attention?" His voice dripped with disdain. "No," I said firmly. "The acquisition was business. But last night, that card, calling me a disgrace, suggesting I was worthless, that was personal, and it was cruel." He flinched slightly, a flash of something, shame perhaps, crossing his face before the familiar mask of authority returned. "You've never understood the real world, Elena. Business is cruel. Life is cruel. I was trying to toughen you up, to prepare you. By humiliating me at Christmas dinner? By giving me a career counseling certificate while everyone else got meaningful gifts? He waved a dismissive hand. You're too sensitive, always have been. And you're too blind to see what's right in front of you, I countered. Look around. Dad, this is my company. These are my offices. That technology you dismissed as a little coding project? It's revolutionizing how supply chains function globally. I didn't need your toughening up. I needed your support. For a long moment, he was silent, his eyes moving around my office, taking in the awards on the wall, the view of Boston, the evidence of success he hadn't bothered to notice before. Your mother is upset, he said finally, deflecting as he always did when confronted with something that didn't fit his narrative. I imagine she is, I replied. Change is upsetting. Is that what this is? Change? It's a correction, I said. A realignment of how we see each other. I'm not the family disgrace dad. I never was. I'm a successful entrepreneur who built something valuable and important. Whether you choose to recognize that or not, doesn't change the reality. He reached for the tablet then, slowly, as if it might burn him. He scrolled through the proposal, his expression unreadable. This is comprehensive, he admitted reluctantly. It's what I do, I said simply. Another long silence followed as he continued reading. I waited, watching him process not just the business proposal, but the larger shift that was occurring. The realization that the power dynamic between us had fundamentally changed. Why not just take over? He asked finally, looking up. You have the leverage. You could force me out, take control of everything. Because I don't want your company, Dad. I want my own. And because despite everything, you're still my father. I don't want to destroy what you've built. I just want you to see what I've built. Something shifted in his expression then. A softening around the eyes. A slight relaxation of his jaw. Not approval, not yet, but perhaps the beginning of reassessment. Merry Christmas, Elena, he said, standing and picking up his coat. I'll have our team review your proposal after the holiday. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even an acknowledgement of how deeply he'd hurt me. But it was a step, however small, towards seeing me as a peer rather than a disappointment. After he left, I sat for a long time looking out at the city. Snow had begun to fall again, soft flakes drifting past my window. My phone buzzed with a message from Margot. Everything okay, boss? Yes, I typed back. Everything is exactly as it should be. Because for the first time in my adult life, I felt truly free. Not from my family's judgment, which would likely continue in some form, but from the weight I'd given that judgment. I no longer needed their approval to know my worth. I had built that knowledge myself, brick by brick, line of code by line of code, team member by team member. They had called me a disgrace, but I had found my grace elsewhere, in creation, in leadership, in the quiet satisfaction of building something meaningful. Outside, Boston disappeared into the gentle veil of falling snow, the world made clean and new again. I picked up my phone, called the airline, and canceled my flight to Zurich. The meetings could wait. Today, I would celebrate Christmas my way, with a quiet acknowledgement of how far I'd come and how far I had yet to go. It had been 3 days since the Christmas confrontation, and I hadn't heard from my family. The partnership proposal sat in digital limbo, neither accepted nor rejected. Just silence, their favorite weapon against me since childhood. The office was quiet, still operating with minimal staff until after New Year's. I sat in my corner, office, reviewing quarterly projections while snow fell steadily outside my window, coating Boston in another layer of pristine white. The world felt muffled, as if even sound had been wrapped in cotton and tucked away. My phone buzzed. Margot. Board members are assembled in conference room C. Ready when you are, boss. I checked my reflection in the darkened computer screen. Tailored. Navy suit, hair pulled back in a sleek chignon. Expression composed. No trace of the Christmas dinner catastrophe on my face. No hint of the family who'd tried to break me. Good. On my way, I replied. The hallway to conference room C felt longer than usual. Through the glass walls, I could see them waiting. 12 people who had believed in Lumina when it was nothing but code and conviction. Men and women who had invested millions, not because I was a Kincaid, but because they recognized value when they saw it. As I entered, they stood, not out of outdated courtesy, but genuine respect, the kind my family had never shown me. Good morning, I said, taking my place at the head of the table. Thank you all for coming in during the holiday week. Roland Chen, my lead investor and board chair, nodded. When the CEO calls an emergency meeting after acquiring Supply Corp, we show up. His tone was light, but his eyes were serious. Big moves deserve big conversations. I smiled, acknowledging the subtle challenge. I've sent you all the detailed acquisition analysis. Supply Corp's distribution network combined with our technology creates efficiencies that will transform the industry, but that's not why I called this meeting. I took a breath, feeling the weight of 12 expectant gazes. 3 days ago, I sent a partnership proposal to Kincaid Industries. The room temperature seemed to drop. Everyone knew the connection. It wasn't a secret that Thomas Kincaid was my father. What they didn't know was the depth of the dysfunction, the years of dismissal culminating in that Christmas Eve card. Maybe next year you'll matter. You want to partner with your father's company? Roland asked carefully. The same company, whose supply chain we just disrupted. The acquisition wasn't about disruption, I corrected. It was about integration. Kincaid Industries is a potential client, nothing more. And the fact that the CEO called you, what was it again? Sarah Livingstone, our CFO, glanced at her notes. The family disgrace at their corporate retreat. Last year? That's not a factor? I felt a flush creep up my neck. I'd forgotten I'd mentioned that comment to Sarah during a late-night strategy session. One small crack in my carefully constructed professional veneer. Personal history is irrelevant, I said firmly. This is business. The partnership makes sense financially and strategically. With all due respect, Elena, Roland leaned forward, personal history is never irrelevant when it involves family, especially when that family has a history of undermining your accomplishments. The room went quiet. My board members exchanged glances, and I suddenly realized this meeting wasn't going as I'd planned. They weren't questioning my business judgment. They were concerned about me. Your family, Roland continued gently, has a documented pattern of dismissing your achievements. 3 years ago, when we secured our first major client, your father told the Boston Business Journal that your company was a temporary diversion before you joined Kincaid Industries. I winced. I'd forgotten about that interview. And last year, Sarah added, at the Tech Innovation Awards, where you won Entrepreneur of the Year, your mother told reporters you were still finding your way, while your brother Michael was described as a visionary leader. Not to mention, Roland continued, the Christmas card incident that several of us witnessed at the holiday party 2 years ago. My stomach clenched. The card had arrived at our company holiday party, delivered by courier in the middle of my speech. Merry Christmas to our wayward daughter. The family discount for psychological counseling has been renewed for another year. You clearly need it. I'd laughed it off, made a joke about boundary issues, continued my speech without missing a beat. But they had seen. They had remembered. I appreciate your concerns, I said, keeping my voice level. But this partnership is sound. The terms protect Lumina completely while offering significant growth opportunities. It's the right move. Financially, perhaps, Roland conceded. But there are other considerations. Such as? Such as your well-being, Sarah said bluntly. Such as not putting yourself in a position to be undermined and disrespected by people who have never recognized your value. I stared at her, then looked around the table. These people, these practical, numbers-driven business leaders, were worried about me. Not the company, not the bottom line. Me. My voice faltered, an unfamiliar sensation. I appreciate your concern, but I can handle my family. We know you can, Roland said. You've been doing it your entire life. But should you have to? Especially now that you have options? I sat back, considering his words. Options. That was what success had given me. Choices my family never thought I'd have. The power to engage. Or withdraw on my terms. What would you suggest? I asked. Let them come to you, Sarah said immediately. They need this partnership more than we do. Let them acknowledge that. And if they don't? Roland shrugged. Then we proceed with our original plan. Supply Corps has other clients. The acquisition is sound with or without Kincaid Industries. I nodded slowly, feeling something unwind inside me. A tension I hadn't recognized until it began to release. All right, we wait for them to respond. But no aggressive moves, no pressure tactics. This isn't about forcing them to their knees. It's about establishing mutual respect. Agreed, Roland said, and the others nodded. Now, shall we discuss the Tokyo implementation timeline? The meeting shifted to safer ground. Metrics and timelines, integration challenges, client retention strategies. This was where I felt most confident, most myself. Not in the shadow of my family's disapproval, but in the clear light of creation and innovation. 2 hours later, as the meeting concluded, Roland lingered behind as the others filed out. Word? He asked. I nodded, watching as he closed the door. 3 years ago, he began. When you pitched Lumina to me, you said something that made me write you a check on the spot. Do you remember what it was? I smiled. I said a lot of things that day. I was desperate for funding. You said, I'm not building this company to prove anything to anyone. I'm building it because it solves a real problem in a way no one else has figured out. I remembered now, that moment of raw honesty after an hour of technical explanations and market analyses. I believed you then, Roland continued. And that's why I invested. Not because of your name, not despite it. Because you had clarity of purpose. He paused. Don't lose that clarity now, Elena. Not for people who couldn't see your value when you were standing right in front of them. After he left, I stood at the window watching the snow, his words echoing in my mind. Clarity of purpose. That's what had driven me from the beginning. Not revenge, not validation, but the simple conviction that I could build something meaningful. My phone buzzed with a text from Andrew. Dad's still reviewing the proposal. Mom's upset you didn't come for Christmas dinner yesterday. The usual. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. The usual meant guilt trips, subtle digs, disappointed sighs. The usual meant nothing had changed despite everything that had happened. As evening fell, I found myself alone in the office, everyone else having left for their delayed holiday celebrations. The city lights twinkled through the falling snow, creating a postcard scene outside my window. Beautiful, perfect, cold. On impulse, I picked up my phone and called a number I rarely used. Dr. Winter's office, a voice answered. This is Elena Kincaid. I'd like to schedule an appointment. 5 years ago, during a particularly difficult period with my family, I'd started seeing Dr. Winters, a therapist specializing in family dynamics and entrepreneurial stress. I'd stopped when Lumina demanded more of my time, but I'd kept her number. Elena, wonderful to hear from you. Dr. Winters has an opening tomorrow at 10 a.m. Would that work? Yes, I said, surprising myself with how quickly I agreed. That would be perfect. After ending the call, I gathered my things and headed for the elevator. The office was silent, the usual hum of conversation and keyboards replaced by the soft whisper of the heating system. As the elevator doors closed, I caught a glimpse of my reflection, professional, composed, successful. But there was something else there too, something I rarely allowed myself to acknowledge. Loneliness. I had built an empire, but empires can be solitary places. I had a team that respected me, investors who believed in me, employees who depended on me. But at the end of the day, I went home to an empty apartment with a view of the river and no one to share it with. The elevator reached the lobby, and I nodded to the security guard as I passed. Outside, the snow had stopped, leaving the city transformed. I decided to walk the few blocks to my apartment, needing the crisp air and movement after a day of meetings. As I walked, my phone rang. Michael's number. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? L. His voice was tight, controlled. We need to talk. I'm listening. Not on the phone? Dinner? Tomorrow night? The Capitol Grill? 8 p.m. It wasn't a request. It was barely an invitation, but it was the first direct communication from any family member since my father had left my office 3 days ago. Why? I asked simply. A pause. Because this has gone far enough. Because we're family, despite everything. Because Dad is too stubborn to reach out himself. I stopped walking, standing still on the snowy sidewalk as pedestrians flowed around me. Is this about the partnership proposal? It's about everything, Elle. Just come, okay? Please. The please caught me off guard. Michael didn't say please. He demanded, he directed, he declared. But he didn't ask. I'll be there, I said. Finally. Thank you. Another surprise. And Elle? Come alone. No assistants, no lawyers. Before I could respond, he hung up. I continued my walk home, turning over the conversation in my mind. What did they want? Capitulation? Reconciliation? Something in between? And what did I want from them, really? By the time I reached my building, I still didn't have answers. Just a growing certainty that tomorrow's dinner would be yet another battlefield in a war that had begun long before I was old enough to understand what we were fighting about. Inside, my apartment. I kicked off my shoes and poured a glass of wine. The Christmas tree I'd impulsively bought and half-heartedly decorated stood in the corner, its lights reflecting in the floor-to-ceiling windows. I'd never been big on Christmas, too many memories of disappointment wrapped in festive paper. But this year, I'd made an effort, as if the physical trappings of holiday cheer might somehow manifest the emotional reality. I curled up on the sofa, watching the city lights shimmer across the river. My mind drifted to Christmases past, standing on the periphery of family photos, receiving practical gifts while my siblings unwrapped extravagances, listening to my father toast their accomplishments while I remained unmentioned. The pattern had been established early. Michael was the heir apparent, groomed for leadership from childhood. Andrew was the charmer, the family diplomat. I was. What? The afterthought, the puzzle piece that never quite fit. Until now. Now I was Elena Kincaid, CEO of Lumina Dynamics, acquirer of SupplyCorp, the woman who had built something so valuable that even my dismissive family couldn't ignore it. I had created my own place in the world, carved it out of determination and vision when no space was offered to me. So why did their rejection still sting? My phone buzzed with an email notification. The sender made my heart skip. Thomas Kincaid. Subject, Partnership Proposal. Elena, after careful review, Kincaid Industries is prepared to discuss the terms of your proposed partnership. Michael will represent our interests at dinner tomorrow night. Please come prepared to negotiate in good faith. Regards, Thomas Kincaid, CEO, Kincaid Industries. No. Dear Elena. No acknowledgement of our relationship, just business, cold and impersonal. I set the phone down, unsurprised but still vaguely disappointed. What had I expected? An apology? A recognition of how deeply they had hurt me? A father signing his email, "Love, Dad," instead of his full name and title? Sleep came fitfully that night, my dreams a jumble of boardrooms and family dinners, contracts and Christmas cards. I woke before dawn, the sky still dark beyond my windows, and made coffee in the silence of early morning. By the time I arrived at Dr. Winter's office, I had already answered 3 urgent emails, approved a press release about the supply core integration, and fielded a call from a nervous client concerned about supply chain disruptions. Elena, Dr. Winters greeted me warmly, gesturing to the familiar leather chair across from hers. It's been a while. I smiled, settling into the chair. Almost 2 years. And how have things been? Where to begin? The company's meteoric growth? The acquisition? The Christmas dinner disaster? The pending dinner with Michael? Complicated, I said finally. She laughed. When aren't they? But let's be specific. What brought you back today? I took a deep breath. My family. Ah. She nodded, unsurprised. The usual suspects. What happened? I told her everything. The Christmas Eve dinner, the card, the acquisition, my father's visit to my office, the partnership proposal, Michael's call. And how do you feel about dinner tonight? She asked when I finished. Wary, I admitted. I don't trust their sudden interest in collaboration. 3 days ago, I was a disgrace. Now I'm a potential business partner? People can change their perspectives when circumstances shift, she offered. My family doesn't change. They adapt. They maneuver, they strategize. But they don't change. Dr. Winters leaned forward slightly. What would you need from them, Elena, to feel that this dinner could be productive? Not just professionally, but personally? I considered the question. Acknowledgement, I said finally. Not just of what I've built, but of how they've treated me. Recognition that their behavior has been damaging. And if they can't give you that? That was the question, wasn't it? What if they couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge the years of dismissal and disrespect? What if they continued to see me through the distorted lens they'd always used? Then we have a business relationship only, I said. Nothing more. Can you separate the two so cleanly? Business and family? I've been doing it my entire life, I replied. They never saw me as family first anyway. I was always a disappointment, before I was a daughter or a sister. Dr. Winters was quiet for a moment, studying me. In our previous sessions, we talked about how your drive to succeed was partly fueled by a desire to prove your family wrong. Is that still true? I started to deny it automatically, then stopped myself. Less than before, I said honestly. When I started Lumina, yes, proving them wrong was part of it. But somewhere along the way, building something meaningful became its own reward. The work itself matters more than their recognition of it. She smiled. That's significant progress. Elena, that shift from external validation to internal purpose is powerful. But family wounds don't heal just because we've developed healthier perspectives. They need direct attention, direct communication. I nodded, knowing she was right but dreading the implication. You're saying I need to tell them how I feel directly, not through business proposals or strategic acquisitions. If healing that relationship is important to you, yes. And if it isn't? The question surprised me as much as her. Dr. Winters raised an eyebrow. Is that true? Is your relationship with your family no longer important to you? I looked out the window, watching snowflakes begin to fall again. I don't know, I said. Finally. I've spent so long trying to earn their respect, their recognition. What if I just stopped trying? What if I accepted that they'll never see me clearly and focused on the people who do? That's a valid choice, she said. Many people create chosen families when their biological ones are harmful, but it's a decision that should be made consciously, not reactively. And tonight's dinner? Go with clarity about what you want from the interaction. Be honest with yourself about your expectations, and remember that you have options now that you didn't have before. You're negotiating from a position of strength, not just financially, but emotionally. I left her office, feeling more centered than I had in days. The snow was falling more heavily now, coating the city in another layer of white. I decided to walk back to the office, needing the physical movement to process our conversation. Strength, options, clarity. These were the gifts my success had given me. Not the money or the status, but the freedom to engage with my family, on my own terms, to set boundaries, to walk away if necessary. My phone buzzed with a text from Margot. Singapore team reports successful integration of first phase systems. Also, your brother Andrew called the office, said it was personal, not business. I paused on the sidewalk. Andrew rarely called me directly and never at the office. Did he leave a message? I texted back. Just asked you to call him before dinner tonight. Said it was important. Curious, I dialed his number. He answered on the first ring. L. Thanks for calling back. What's up, Andrew? Is everything okay? A pause. That depends on your definition of okay. Look, I wanted to warn you about tonight. My guard immediately went up. Warn me? Michael's on the warpath. Dad's given him full authority to negotiate the partnership, but he's not happy about it. When is Michael ever happy about anything involving me? Andrew's laugh was short, humorless. Fair point. But this is different. He sees the Supply Corps acquisition as a direct attack on him personally. He was leading the negotiations to buy them before you stepped in. That was news to me. I didn't know. Of course not. Why would anyone tell you anything? The bitterness in his voice surprised me. Andrew had always been the peacemaker, the one who stayed above the fray. Anyway, he's going to try to pressure you into terms that favor Kincaid Industries heavily. Dad's told him to get a win out of this situation. And you're telling me this why? Another pause. Because it's not right, Elle. It never has been. The way they treat you, the way they've always treated you. I should have said something years ago. I leaned against a building, stunned by the unexpected alliance. Thank you, I said simply. Don't thank me. I'm complicit. I stood by and watched for years. Never contradicted Dad. Never defended you. I'm not proud of that. You were a kid, too, Andrew. Not for a long time now. His voice had hardened. Anyway, I just wanted you to be prepared. Michael's going to come at you hard. Don't let him bulldoze you, but don't walk away either. There's more at stake here than business. Like what? Like the chance to finally be seen, Elle. Really seen. By all of us. After we hung up, I stood in the falling snow, letting his words sink in. The chance to be seen. Wasn't that what I'd wanted all along? Not the grand revenge fantasy of taking over their company or forcing them to their knees, but the simple human desire to be recognized for who I really was. As I continued my walk back to the office, I felt a strange lightness despite the heavy conversation ahead. For the first time in years, I was approaching a family interaction not as the perennial disappointment, but as myself, Elena Kincaid, builder, creator, leader. Whatever happened at dinner tonight, I would be standing on a foundation of my own making. And that, more than any business deal or family reconciliation, was the true victory. The Capitol Grill was already crowded when I arrived, the holiday, week drawing both tourists and locals to its warm interior. Snow dusted my shoulders as I stepped inside, handing my coat to the attendant who greeted me by name. I'd closed 3 major deals in this restaurant, chosen for its discreet private dining rooms and exceptional wine list. Tonight, though, I wasn't here to close a deal. At least not a business one. "Ms. Kincaid," the hostess smiled. "Your brother is already seated in the private room. May I show you back?" I nodded, following her through the main dining area where business people and families created a gentle hum of conversation and clinking glasses. The private room was tucked away in the back, offering both quiet and anonymity, perfect for difficult conversations. When she opened the door, I was surprised to find not just Michael waiting, but Andrew as well. They sat across from each other at a round table set for 3, an open bottle of wine between them. Michael's face was a careful mask of neutrality, but Andrew offered a small smile. "You're early," Michael said, rising as I entered. "Not a greeting, just an observation." "So are you," I replied, taking the seat between them. I didn't realize Andrew would be joining us. "Last-minute addition," Andrew said. "Hope that's okay." I gave him a subtle nod, grateful for the buffer. Michael had always been the most combative of my siblings, the one most invested in maintaining the family hierarchy with himself near the top, and me firmly at the bottom. "I've ordered for us," Michael continued, pouring wine into my glass without asking if I wanted it. "The chef is preparing something special." "How presumptuous," I remarked, taking a small sip of the wine. It was excellent, of course. Michael knew his wines. "What if I'd wanted the salmon?" "You hate salmon," Andrew interjected. "You've hated it since that fishing trip when Dad made you clean your own catch." The memory surfaced unexpectedly. 9-year-old? Me, hands shaking as I tried to scrape scales from a fish while my brothers had already finished theirs. My father standing over me, sighing with each fumbled attempt. "Even this, Elena? Even this simple task?" "Right," I said, pushing the memory away. "No salmon." Michael cleared his throat. "We should get to business." "Before the appetizers?" I raised an eyebrow. "That's not like you, Michael. You usually prefer to soften people up with food and wine before going for the jugular." His jaw tightened. "This isn't a hostile negotiation, Elena." "Isn't it?" I set my wine glass down, meeting his gaze directly. "Dad's email made it pretty clear this is strictly business. And your history with me suggests you're not interested in a friendly family dinner." Andrew shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe we could ease into things? How's Lumina doing? The supply core integration moving smoothly?" I smiled at his clumsy attempt to diffuse the tension. "Lumina is thriving. The integration is proceeding ahead of schedule. Our clients are excited about the enhanced capabilities." "Clients other than Kincaid Industries, you mean?" Michael said. And there it was, the opening salvo. "Yes," I agreed. "Though the partnership proposal I sent offers significant benefits to Kincaid as well. If you've reviewed it thoroughly, you know that." "I've reviewed it," Michael said, swirling his wine. "It's ambitious." "It's fair," I corrected. "Equitable to both companies. It gives Lumina access to our manufacturing infrastructure without any corresponding control. For us," I shook my head. "It gives Lumina access to your manufacturing in exchange for proprietary technology that will increase your efficiency by an estimated 32%. Technology that took us years to develop and refine. Technology that you developed while working at Kincaid," Michael countered, "before you left." My blood went cold. "That's not true, isn't it? You were working in our tech division for 3 years. Are you saying none of those ideas germinated there?" I set my glass down carefully, anger rising like a tide. "I'm saying that Lumina's core technology was developed entirely after I left. Kincaid, it's wholly original and wholly owned by my company. Any suggestion otherwise is not just false, it's potentially libelous." Andrew cut in quickly. No one's suggesting anything inappropriate, Elle. Michael's just pointing out that your experience at Kincaid informed your later work. Of course it did, I acknowledged. Just as Michael's MBA informed his work, just as your law degree informed yours. We all build on our experiences. The difference, Michael said, leaning forward, is that we built within the family company. You took your experience elsewhere. I stared at him, finally understanding. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Not the technology, not the partnership. You're still angry that I left. I'm angry that you're using what you learned from us against us. Against you? I laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. I offered you a partnership that would benefit both companies. How is that against you? You acquired our main supplier without warning or consultation. You threatened our entire supply chain. And now you're offering to fix the problem you created, but only on your terms. Michael's voice had risen slightly, his control slipping. It's manipulative and underhanded. It's business, I replied calmly. The same business you and Dad have always prided yourselves on. Decisive, strategic, forward-thinking. The only difference is that this time, I'm the one making the moves. The door opened before Michael could respond, a waiter entering with a tray of appetizers. We fell silent as he arranged them on the table, the tension in the room thick enough to cut with the steak knives still waiting to be used. After he left, Andrew reached for a stuffed mushroom. These look amazing. Elle, you should try one. I ignored the diversion. Let's be clear, Michael. I didn't acquire Supply Corps to hurt Kincaid Industries. I did it because it was the right move for Lumina. The fact that it affects your company is incidental. Incidental, he repeated, the word dripping with skepticism. Nothing you do regarding this family is incidental, Elena. It never has been. What's that supposed to mean? It means, he said, reaching for his wine, that everything you've done since leaving Kincaid has been about proving a point. About showing Dad, showing all of us, that you don't need us, that you can succeed without us, that you're better than us. The accusation hung in the air between us. There was a kernel of truth in it, I had to admit. In the beginning, proving them wrong had been part of my motivation. But it had evolved into something purer, something more powerful. You're partly right, I said finally. When I started Lumina, yes, proving you all wrong was a factor, but that changed. The work itself became the purpose, building something meaningful, solving real problems, creating value that hadn't existed before. How convenient, Michael muttered. It's not convenient, it's growth, I countered. Something you might want to try sometime. Andrew cleared his throat. This isn't productive. We're here to discuss the partnership, not litigate family history. They're inseparable, I said, turning to him. You know that. This has never been just business between us. Then what do you want, Elena? Michael asked, his frustration evident. You've made your point. You've built a successful company. You've acquired a key supplier. You hold significant leverage. What more do you want from us? The question caught me off guard with its directness. What did I want? The partnership was just business. The acquisition was just business. But this dinner, this confrontation, this was personal. And my wants were personal too. I want acknowledgement, I said finally. Not just of what I've built, but of how you've treated me. For years you've dismissed me, belittled me, excluded me. At Christmas, Dad called me a disgrace and gave me a career counseling certificate while the rest of you received meaningful gifts. And none of you said a word. Michael looked away, uncomfortable with the raw emotion in my voice. That's not business, Michael. That's cruelty. And it's been the pattern for as long as I can remember. Andrew reached over, placing his hand on mine briefly. She's right, Mike. You know she is. Michael's jaw worked as he stared at his plate. Dad's from a different generation. He shows affection differently. That wasn't affection, I said. Quietly. That was contempt. He was trying to motivate you, Michael insisted. To push you to be better. By humiliating me? By calling me worthless? How would that possibly motivate anyone? It worked on me, he said, so softly I almost missed it. I stared at him, seeing something I'd never noticed before. A vulnerability. Beneath the polished exterior, a glimpse of the boy who had also been shaped by our father's harsh standards. Dad did the same to you, I realized aloud. Michael shrugged, trying for nonchalance but not quite achieving it. Different words, same message. Not good enough. Try harder. Don't embarrass me. He was harder on you two, Andrew acknowledged. I was the baby. I got away with more. He was preparing us, Michael said, as if reciting a mantra he'd repeated to himself countless times. Business is brutal. Life is harsh. Better to learn it at home than be blindsided in the real world. I shook my head slowly. That's not preparation, Michael. That's abuse. The word landed like a stone in still water, sending ripples through the carefully maintained facade of our family narrative. Michael flinched visibly. Andrew looked down at his hands. That's a strong word, Michael said finally. It's the right one, I insisted. And it's time we called it what it was. What it is. The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken truths and long-buried emotions. The three of us sat there, surrounded by luxury and fine food, finally confronting the damage that had been done to us in the name of success and family legacy. I didn't know about the career counseling certificate, Michael said eventually. I thought you got the same as everyone else. I never have, I said simply. Not once. He nodded slowly, accepting this truth. The partnership proposal, he said, changing subjects but not tone, is actually quite good. I told Dad that this morning. The pivot surprised me. You did? I'm still CFO of Kincaid Industries, Elena. My job is to evaluate business opportunities objectively, and objectively, your proposal makes sense for both companies. I studied him, trying to reconcile this professional assessment with the brother, who had minutes ago accused me of manipulation and underhanded tactics. So where does that leave us? I asked. Professionally? With a partnership that benefits both Lumina and Kincaid, assuming we can agree on some minor adjustments to the terms. And personally? Michael hesitated, looking uncomfortable with the question. That's more complicated. It doesn't have to be, Andrew interjected. We start by acknowledging the truth. All of it. How Dad treated you. How we went along with it. How wrong it all was. I turned to him, surprised by his directness. When did you become so insightful? He smiled ruefully. Therapy. Lots of it. Turns out being the easy child comes with its own issues. For the first time that evening, I laughed genuinely. I have a standing appointment every Thursday. Mondays at 3, Andrew admitted. We both looked at Michael, who sighed dramatically. Tuesdays and Fridays, Dr. Levinson on the back bay. And suddenly, unexpectedly, we were laughing together, 3 damaged adults bound by shared trauma and expensive therapy, finding momentary relief in the acknowledgement of our common ground. As our laughter subsided, Michael refilled our wine glasses, his movements more relaxed than before. I'm not good at apologies, he said, not meeting my eyes. Never have been. You don't say, I replied dryly. But I am sorry, Elle. For a lot of things. For not standing up for you. For buying into Dad's assessment of you. For letting him turn us into competitors instead of siblings. The words washed over me like a warm wave, unexpected and healing. I had come to this dinner prepared for battle, not reconciliation. The shift left me momentarily speechless. "Thank you," I said finally. "That means a lot." "Don't expect the same from Dad," Andrew warned. "He's incapable of that kind of self-reflection." "I know," I acknowledged. "I stopped expecting it a long time ago." "But he does respect what you've built," Michael added. "He won't say it to your face, but he talks about Lumina's growth metrics when he thinks you're not around to hear it. He tracks your stock price." The revelation shouldn't have affected me, but it did. A small ember of warmth in the cold landscape of our relationship. "The partnership will go through," Michael continued. "With some adjustments we can discuss later, but not because he's afraid of what you'll do to Kincaid's supply chain, because he recognizes the value proposition." "Professional respect," I mused. "I suppose that's something." "It's everything to him," Andrew said. "You know that. It's the highest form of love he's capable of expressing." I nodded, feeling a strange mix of sadness and acceptance. Our father was who he was, damaged, limited, incapable of the emotional honesty that his children had found through years of therapy and hard self-examination. I could continue fighting for a recognition he couldn't give, or I could accept the form of acknowledgement he was capable of offering. "So we move forward," I said. "Professionally as partners, personally as works in progress," Andrew suggested. Michael raised his glass. "To works in progress, then." We clinked glasses, this toast so different from the ones at family gatherings where I had been systematically excluded from the celebration of success. This one included me not out of obligation or afterthought, but as an equal, a fellow survivor, a builder, a Kincaid in the ways that mattered. As we moved on to discussing the specifics of the partnership, I felt a subtle shift in my relationship with my brothers. Not healing, exactly. That would take more than one dinner and a few apologies. But a crack in the wall that had separated us for so long. A possibility where before there had been only rigid certainty. By the time dessert arrived, we had outlined the framework for a revised partnership agreement that preserved the core benefits for both companies while addressing Michael's concerns about intellectual property protections. It was a good deal, made better by the fact that it had been negotiated with honesty rather than manipulation. "There's something else," Andrew said as we waited for the check. "A surprise we've been working on." I raised an eyebrow. "What kind of surprise?" "The good kind, I think." He glanced at Michael, who nodded encouragement. "We've created a family foundation, the Kincaid Innovation Fund. It will provide seed money to women entrepreneurs in tech, focusing on those who've been overlooked by traditional venture capital." "That's impressive," I said, genuinely surprised. "Dad approved this?" "He didn't just approve it," Michael replied. "It was his idea. After your confrontation at Christmas, he spent a few days researching your journey. He came across an interview you gave to Tech Founder where you talked about the barriers women face in raising capital." I remembered that interview, a rare moment of candor where I'd discussed the sexism I'd encountered while building Lumina. "The foundation will launch next month," Andrew continued. "We'd like you to be on the board, not as a token but because you understand the challenges these women will face better than anyone else in the family." The offer touched me deeply, not just for what it was, but for what it represented. My father, unable to apologize directly, had found another way to acknowledge the obstacles I'd overcome. It wasn't the emotional validation I'd once craved, but it was meaningful in its own. I'd be honored," I said simply. As we left the restaurant, the snow had stopped, leaving the city streets glistening under the streetlights. My brothers and I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, none of us quite ready to end this unexpected moment of connection. "This doesn't fix everything," I said finally. "You know that, right?" "Of course not," Michael agreed. "But it's a start." "A better start than we've ever had before," Andrew added. I nodded, accepting this truth. I'll have my team send over the revised partnership agreement tomorrow. And I'll have our legal department fast-track the review, Michael replied. Business concluded, we stood there awkwardly, three adults who shared blood and history but had never learned how to express affection naturally. Well, I said, good night then. Andrew surprised me by stepping forward and enveloping me in a quick, fierce hug. We're proud of you, Elle, he whispered. I'm sorry it took us so long to say it. Michael, never comfortable with physical displays, simply extended his hand. When I took it, he held on longer than necessary, his grip firm but not dominating, as it once would have been. You built something remarkable, he said. It's time we all acknowledge that. As I watched them walk away, I felt lighter than I had in years. Not healed, not whole, but unburdened of a weight I'd carried for so long it had become part of me. The weight of seeking approval from people who had been programmed to withhold it. The weight of proving my worth to those who had decided my value before I'd had a chance to demonstrate it. I took a deep breath of the cold night air, feeling it fill my lungs with clarity and purpose. My phone buzzed with a text from Margot. Tokyo team wants to move up the timeline. Possible? Just like that, I was back in the world I had created. The world where I was valued not for my name but for what I had built. I smiled, typing back, tell them yes, we can make it work. Because that's what I did now. I built things. I made things work. I created value where there had been none before. And I did it not to prove anything to my family, but because it was who I had become, a builder, a problem solver, a creator. As I walked back to my apartment through the quiet streets, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. From the little girl desperate for her father's approval to the woman who had built an empire on her own terms. It hadn't been a straight line. There had been detours and setbacks, moments of doubt and nights of tears. But I had kept moving forward, kept building, kept believing in the vision even when no one else could see it. And now, even those who had dismissed me were beginning to see what I had always known, that I was never the family disgrace. I was its most unexpected triumph. 6 months after that pivotal dinner with my brothers, I stood in the glass-walled conference room of Lumina's newly expanded headquarters, watching as employees filled the space beyond. The buzz of conversation, punctuated by laughter and the clinking of champagne glasses, created a warm hum of celebration. Today marked not just the official launch of our integrated platform with SupplyCore, but the first public announcement of our partnership with Clinked Industries. 5 minutes until your speech, Margot said, appearing at my elbow with a tablet in hand. The press is assembled, live stream is up, and your father just arrived. I felt a small flutter in my stomach at the last part. My father? He wasn't on the attendance list. She shrugged. Last-minute addition. Security just cleared him through the lobby. I nodded, adjusting the cuffs of my blazer, a nervous habit from childhood I'd never quite shaken. Where is he now? Michael brought him to the executive lounge, said you'd know when to come get him. Another surprise. I'd expected Michael to attend as Kincaid's representative, but my father's presence changed the dynamic entirely. We'd spoken only twice since Christmas. Brief, stilted conversations focused entirely on business. The partnership agreement had been negotiated primarily through our respective teams, with occasional input from Michael and me when necessary. The speech is ready? I asked, though I knew the answer. Margot was nothing if not thorough. Loaded on the teleprompter and backed up on your tablet. Though you've practiced it so much, I doubt you need either. I smiled, grateful for her steady presence. Better safe than sorry. This is too important to risk stumbling. She studied me for a moment, her expression softening. You're not nervous about the speech. You're nervous about him being here. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. I wasn't expecting it. Do you want me to find out why he came? I shook my head. No. I'll deal with it after the announcement. I took a deep breath, centering myself. Let's do this. The applause started the moment I stepped onto the small stage at the front of the room. Employees, investors, press, clients, all gathered to witness what industry analysts were already calling the tech integration of the year. I smiled, waiting for the noise to subside before beginning. Thank you all for being here today, I started, my voice strong and clear. 3 years ago, Lumina Dynamics began with a simple but ambitious mission: to transform how supply chains function in a global economy. We believed that with the right technology, the right vision, and the right team, we could create efficiencies that would revolutionize multiple industries. I paused, looking out at the sea of faces, the engineers who had coded through countless nights, the sales team who had believed in something that didn't yet exist, the clients who had taken a chance on a startup with big ideas. Today, I'm proud to announce that we've taken a major step toward fulfilling that mission. Our integration with SupplyCore is now complete, 3 months ahead of schedule and under budget. More applause, louder this time. I waited for it to quiet before continuing. But that's only part of today's announcement. I'm also thrilled to share that Lumina Dynamics and Kincaid Industries have formalized a strategic partnership that will revolutionize manufacturing efficiency across 12 industries. As I outline the details of the partnership, the integration points, the efficiency gains, the market expansion opportunities, I spotted my father at the back of the room. He stood straight-backed and expressionless, his silver hair gleaming under the lights, watching me with an intensity I remembered from childhood. Michael stood beside him, nodding slightly as I hit each key point of our agreement. This partnership represents more than just a business arrangement, I continued. It represents what's possible when innovation and experience come together, when established industry leaders and nimble tech disruptors collaborate rather than compete. I didn't look directly at my father as I said this, but the subtext was clear to anyone who knew our history. This wasn't just about Lumina and Kincaid Industries. It was about me and him, the tech disruptor and the industry leader, finding a way to collaborate after years of discord. In closing, I want to thank everyone who helped make this day possible. Our incredible team at Lumina, our partners at SupplyCore, and our new collaborators at Kincaid Industries. Together, we're not just changing how supply chains work. We're redefining what's possible when we combine the best of innovation and industry expertise. The room erupted in applause as I stepped away from the podium. Margot appeared at my side, professional as always despite the celebration around us. Perfect delivery, she said quietly. The social media response is already overwhelming. Lumina Kincaid is trending. I nodded, my eyes still on my father across the room. He hadn't moved, hadn't applauded, but he was watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. I should go talk to him, I said. Your schedule has 20 minutes for press questions first, Margot reminded me. Reschedule them for after the reception. Family first, just this once. Her eyebrows rose slightly. I'd never prioritized family over business before, but she nodded. I'll handle it. Making my way through the crowd took time. Everyone wanted to offer congratulations, ask questions, make connections. I moved through the throng with practiced efficiency, shaking hands, exchanging brief pleasantries, promising to circle back later. By the time I reached the back of the room, my father was alone, Michael having been pulled into a conversation with our CTO nearby. Dad, I said, stopping a few feet away from him, I didn't know you were coming. Last-minute decision, he replied, his voice as measured as always. Michael thought it would send a stronger message about the partnership if both CEOs were present. Always business, never personal. Some things never changed. Well, thank you for coming, I said, matching his formal tone. It does make a statement. He nodded, glancing around the crowded room. Impressive turnout. We've been planning this announcement for months. The industry was ready for it. An awkward silence fell between us, filled with all the things neither of us knew how to say. I was about to excuse myself when he spoke again. Your speech was good. Clear, confident, forward-looking. Coming from Thomas Kincaid, this constituted effusive praise. I felt a small, unwanted flutter of pleasure at his approval, a childhood response I thought I'd outgrown. Thank you, I said simply. He cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. Michael tells me the Kincaid Innovation Fund has received over 300 applications already. 342 as of this morning, I confirmed. The quality is exceptional. The selection committee has a difficult task ahead. You're chairing that committee? It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. Yes, we're announcing the first round of funding recipients next month. Another silence, less awkward this time but still heavy with unspoken history. My father shifted his weight slightly, a rare sign of discomfort from a man who prided himself on unwavering composure. I read the profile of you in Forbes, he said finally. The supply chain revolutionary. They were quite complimentary. I smiled slightly. They exaggerated in parts, but the essence was accurate. They mentioned your early years. At Kincaid, said you left because you saw potential for innovation that traditional industry players were missing. I tensed, wondering if he was offended by this characterization. That's one way to frame it. It's accurate, he said, surprising. Me. We were too focused on incremental improvements. You saw the potential for transformation. He paused. You saw what I couldn't. The admission, so simple, so straightforward, so unlike him, left me momentarily speechless. It wasn't an apology for years of dismissal and disrespect. It wasn't an acknowledgement of the emotional damage done. But in the language of Thomas Kincaid, it was as close to validation as he was capable of offering. Thank you for saying that, I said finally. He nodded once, his version of emotional closure. The partnership makes sense for both companies. The board is pleased. And just like that, we were back to business. I felt a pang of disappointment, quickly suppressed. This was who he was, a man who could acknowledge professional oversight but could never address personal failure. I had accepted that months ago. I couldn't expect him to transform now. I should circulate, I said, gesturing to the crowd. But I appreciate you coming today. Elena. He stopped me as I turned to leave, his voice softer than usual. The Sci-I Innovation Fund. It's doing important work. Supporting founders who might otherwise be overlooked. It's significant. I studied him, recognizing the olive branch for what it was. Not the warm embrace I'd once longed for, but a sincere acknowledgement of value, the highest form of respect he was capable of expressing. Yes, I agreed. It is. We looked at each other for a moment longer, two people connected by blood, but separated by temperament and history, finding a fragile middle ground in shared purpose, if not shared emotional language. I'll see you at the board meeting next week, he said finally. I nodded. I'll be there. As he walked away, I felt a curious mixture of emotions, not the vindication I might have expected, nor the lingering resentment that had fueled me for so long, but something calmer, more centered. I had stopped seeking his approval when I realized it would never come in the form I wanted, but in its place had grown something else, a professional respect that, while not warm, was genuine. Everything okay? Michael asked, appearing at my elbow. Yes, I said, surprised to find it was true. Everything is as it should be. The reception continued around us, a celebration of business success and technological innovation. But as I moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and discussing next steps, I found my thoughts drifting to the journey that had brought me here. Not the external milestones, the funding rounds, the client acquisitions, the integration with Supply Corps, but the internal transformation from a woman desperate for family validation to one who had found her worth elsewhere. Later that evening, after the last guests had departed and only the core team remained, we gathered in my office for a more intimate celebration. Champagne flowed freely as we toasted the day's success and the road ahead. To Elena, Roland Chen raised his glass, who saw what others couldn't and built what they said was impossible. To the team, I countered, lifting my own glass, who took a vision and made it reality. As conversations flowed around me, I stepped away to the window, looking out at the Boston skyline, now glittering against the night sky. The city where I'd been raised, where I'd been dismissed, where I'd ultimately proven my worth, not to my family, but to myself and to the world. "Penny for your thoughts?" Sarah asked, joining me by the window. I smiled, just reflecting on the journey. It's been quite a ride. "And it's just beginning," she said. "The partnership with Kincaid opens up possibilities we haven't even explored yet." True, but I was thinking more about the personal journey. She nodded, understanding immediately. "Seeing your father here today must have been complicated." "Less than I expected, actually. There was a time when his presence would have thrown me completely, made me question every word, every decision, every aspect of myself. Today, it was just a fact. Neither devastating nor particularly meaningful. "That's growth," she observed. "Real, substantial growth." "It is," I agreed. Though part of me is sad about it too. There's a loss in letting go of the hope that he'll ever be the father I wanted. But freedom in accepting who he actually is? Exactly. We stood in companionable silence, watching the city lights. Below us, the Charles River wound its dark path through Boston, reflecting the illuminated buildings along its banks. I thought about rivers, how they carved their own courses through resistant landscapes, creating beauty from obstacle, finding their way to the sea despite everything. "What's next?" Sarah asked eventually. "After the integration? After the partnership? What's your vision now?" It was a good question, one I'd been pondering myself in quiet moments. For so long, my drive had been fueled partly by the need to prove my worth to a family that couldn't see it. With that motivation fading, what would take its place? "Expansion," I said, the vision crystallizing as I spoke. "Not just geographically or in market share, but in purpose. We've proven we can transform supply chains. Now I want to transform how business itself functions. More collaborative, more innovative, more humane." "Ambitious," she remarked with a smile. "Always," I agreed. But that's how change happens, by imagining something better than what exists and then building it, piece by piece, day by day. Despite the obstacles? Because of them, I corrected. Obstacles are where innovation happens. If everything worked perfectly, there'd be no need to create something new. The party began to wind down, team members drifting away in twos and threes, buoyed by success and champagne. I remained by the window, watching the city below, feeling a sense of peace that had eluded me for years. My phone buzzed with a text. "Andrew, Dad actually smiled when talking about the announcement tonight. Historic moment. You did that." I smiled, typing back, "Progress, not perfection." His response came quickly. "The family motto we never had but should have. Dinner Sunday? Just us siblings." "Count me in," I replied. As I slipped my phone back into my pocket, Margot approached, tablet in hand as always. "The press coverage is overwhelming positive," she reported. "The partnership is being hailed as visionary. Your quote about collaboration over competition is everywhere." "Good," I said. That's the message that matters. Also, she continued, the Young Entrepreneurs Mentorship Program called. They want you to give the keynote at their annual conference next month. Theme is Building Despite Barriers. I considered the request, thinking about all I could share, not just about business strategy and technological innovation, but about perseverance, self-worth, and finding purpose beyond validation. Accept, I said, and block off time for me to really prepare. I want to do this right. Margot nodded, making a note. They specifically mentioned they want you to address the personal journey as well as the professional one. They said their members need to hear from someone who succeeded, despite significant obstacles. I looked out at the city again, thinking about the young woman I had been. So desperate for approval, so certain of her unworthiness because those who should have valued her most had told her she was lacking. I'll tell them the truth, I said. All of it. The rejection, the doubt, the moments I almost gave up, and the discovery that success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. Powerful message, Margot observed. A necessary one, I replied. Too many talented. People give up because they believe what others say about their potential. They need to hear that worth isn't bestowed by others. It's created through vision, work, and resilience. After Margot left, I remained alone in my office, the silence a welcome respite after the day's events. On my desk sat a small glass, award we'd given to each team member who had worked on the integration project. A simple crystal cube with the Lumina logo and the words, "Vision becomes reality," etched inside. I picked it up, turning it in my hand, watching how it caught and refracted the light. In many ways, it symbolized my journey, taking something invisible but powerful, vision, potential, self-belief, and transforming it into something tangible and undeniable. My father would never give me the emotional validation I had once craved. My family would never fully understand the damage their dismissal had caused. But in building Lumina, I had created something more valuable than their approval, testament to what's possible when you refuse to let others define your worth. The next morning dawned clear and crisp, the first hints of spring softening Boston's harsh winter edges. I arrived at the office early, before most of the team, wanting quiet time to plan the next phase of our growth. As I settled at my desk, coffee in hand, my assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Elena, there's a delivery for you in the lobby." "Send it up," I replied, assuming it was the usual post-event flowers or congratulatory gift basket from a client. Minutes later, a young courier arrived with a small package wrapped in simple brown paper. No card, no note, just my name written in a familiar, strong hand, my father's distinctive script. I thanked the courier and sat with the package for a moment, curious but not anxious. Whatever it contained, it no longer held the power to wound me. Carefully, I removed the paper to find a small wooden box, hand-carved from dark walnut. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, lay an antique compass, tarnished silver, glass slightly clouded with age, but still functional. I lifted it carefully, feeling its weight in my palm. Beneath it was a folded note, just 3 lines in my father's precise handwriting. Found this in my father's study. He gave it to me when I started Kincaid Industries. Said a good leader always knows true north. Even when the path isn't clear, it belongs with you now. TK. I stared at the compass, understanding the significance of the gesture. Not a personal heirloom passed from father to daughter, but a professional one passed from one CEO to another. Not a token of paternal love, but a recognition of leadership, ability, the highest acknowledgement he was capable of offering. 5 years ago, I would have been devastated by the formality, the emotional distance, the inability to simply say, "I'm proud of you," or "I was wrong about you." But today, I saw it differently. not as what was missing, but as what was present. A respect he had never shown before. An acknowledgement of my place not just in the business world, but in the family legacy. I placed the compass on my desk, where the morning light caught its silver surface. True north. I smiled at the metaphor. My father had spent years trying to direct my path, convinced he knew which way I should go. What he hadn't understood, what perhaps he still didn't fully grasp, was that my true north had always been different from his. Not better or worse, just oriented toward a different purpose, a different definition of success. Margot entered, with the day's schedule pausing when she saw the compass. New acquisition? Old one, actually, I replied. A family heirloom of sorts. She raised an eyebrow but didn't pry further. The Singapore team is online in 10 minutes to discuss the expansion timeline. Then you have the Innovation Fund Selection Committee at 11. I nodded, turning my attention to the day ahead. Let's get started. As I moved through the morning's meetings, making decisions and setting direction for the company I had built, I felt a deep sense of alignment with my purpose, with my values, with the person I had become through challenge and perseverance. My father had once called me the family disgrace. At Christmas, he'd given me a career counseling certificate while telling me I was worthless. But what he hadn't understood was that in dismissing me, he had inadvertently set me free. Free to define success on my own terms. Free to build something that reflected my vision rather than his expectations. The compass on my desk caught the light as I turned to answer a question from the Singapore team. True north. Not his definition of it, but mine. Not the path of least resistance, but the one that led to genuine fulfillment and impact. That evening, as I prepared notes for the Young Entrepreneur's keynote, I thought about what message would have helped me most during my darkest moments of doubt and rejection. What truth would have sustained me when my family's dismissal cut deepest? I began to write, the words flowing easily. Your worth isn't determined by those who can't see your value. It's created through what you build, what you give, what you transform. The people who dismiss you today may someday stand in awe of what you've created, not because you've changed, but because your persistence has finally forced them to see what was always there. The journey from dismissal to recognition isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right, about your potential, your vision, your capacity to create something meaningful despite every obstacle. My family once called me a disgrace at Christmas. They said I was worthless, that I'd never build anything of value. But what they didn't know was that their dismissal was fertilizer, not poison. It helped grow something they couldn't imagine and couldn't control, a vision bigger than their limited perspective, a success defined not by their approval, but by real-world impact. True freedom comes not when others finally recognize your worth, but when you no longer need their recognition. To know your value, I sat back, reading over what I'd written. These weren't just words for an audience of strangers. They were truths I had lived, lessons hard-won through years of struggle and self-doubt. My phone buzzed with a text from Michael. Q2 numbers for the partnership integration are exceeding projections. Dad's actually impressed. Though he'd never say it directly. I smiled, typing back. Some things never change, but some things do. His response was immediate. The important things. I set my phone down and returned to my notes, thinking about transformation, how people, companies, and relationships can evolve when given the right conditions and enough time. My family hadn't changed entirely. My father would never be the emotionally available parent I had once longed for. But the dynamic had shifted, the power balance realigned, the possibility of respect if not warmth now real, where once it had seemed impossible. And I had changed too, no longer defining my worth through their eyes, no longer seeking validation from those who couldn't or wouldn't give it. I had built my own foundation, stone by stone, code by code, decision by decision. Outside my window, Boston was coming alive with evening lights, a constellation of human ambition and creation spread before me. Somewhere in that glittering landscape was the Kincaid Industries Tower, where my father was perhaps still working, reviewing the same integration numbers that had prompted Michael's text. We were connected now not primarily by blood or history, but by mutual respect and shared purpose, an outcome I couldn't have imagined during those painful Christmas dinners and dismissive family gatherings. The family disgrace had become the industry disruptor. The worthless daughter had built something of immense value. The one who would never amount to anything had transformed not just a company, but an entire industry approach. And in doing so, I had discovered the most important truth of all, that the real victory wasn't in gaining their approval, but in no longer needing it to recognize my own worth. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.